Welcome back to the channel. Buna here. Today we're going to be getting all our stories from the subreddit True Scary Stories. After my first video I realized I really enjoy reading these stories, and I'm not even the type of person to really read any books, but I enjoyed reading all the stories from the last video, the cheating, the drama, the suspense. But now we're doing scary stories. You can have this video on in the background while you study, maybe while you try to fall asleep. And like usual, I'm going to be walking at night alone in the dark. Hope you enjoy. The Deep Woods Bunker. I used to work armed security at a plant that made explosives for the military. For context, I need to explain what an unusual place this was due to the dangerous nature of the materials being handled. The army took security very seriously. The plant was technically an army base, but the strange thing was that there were practically no military personnel there, other than the colonel who was in charge of the base. All the other jobs, like security, were given to civilian contractors. It is hard to explain the exact reason why, but I always got the feeling the military did not want to be there, almost like they didn't want to risk their own soldiers. I assume due to the danger of explosives, as buildings had exploded in the past, but now I think they had a different reason for not wanting to be there. This place was way out in the middle of nowhere, deep in the mountains, surrounded by forests. I guess because if there ever were a really bad explosion, meltdown, or hazardous vapor leak, they wouldn't want to be near a town or any people. I won't say where exactly the base was, as I don't want to get in trouble with the government, and I won't use any real names. I had to get all kinds of security clearances and background checks just to work there. I wish I had never taken the job, but the pay was just too good, and the work wasn't hard, even though I had to drive well over an hour just to get there every day. But hey, the pay was worth it, and I had a kid on the way. We did a lot of patrols, just driving around the base, checking that locks were secure, but mostly it was just a lot of doing nothing. A lot of guys on security would slack off and wouldn't even check the locks at night because nobody was watching the cameras, but the base was so huge that they couldn't even have cameras everywhere. I saw a lot of strange things while working there, mostly deformed animals and such, probably from all the pollution from the plant. I swear one time I think I saw a two-headed deer, but I can't be sure. However, the strangest thing I can remember happened one night when I was on patrol. It was the middle of the night and the weekend, so there weren't as many people on staff. So I figured I'd just BS my way through the paperwork like a lot of the other guys did, and just say that I went to check out the clock. I figured I'd rather explore instead. The factory was huge with over 300 buildings, but it was a small portion of the entire property, which I was told was around 10,000 acres, though I can't be sure. What I do know is that there was a chain link perimeter fence with rusty coils of barbed wire at the top that surrounded the entire property. It went for miles and miles and miles into the woods, seemingly forever. There were all kinds of roads inside the fence that seemed to lead to nowhere. Many of them lead to perimeter gates with nothing but dense vegetation on the other side. I have no idea why these gates would even exist way out in the middle of nowhere, but it was my job to drive out there and check the locks. I was in what we referred to as the magazine area. Basically, it was rows and rows of underground bunkers where they would store the finished products like C4 missiles and other explosive components. They were all spaced 200 yards apart. In case there was an explosion, it wouldn't start a chain reaction. In order to get to the magazine area, I had to cross an old stone bridge over a wide river. It had a fairly advanced electronic gate, which contrasted strangely with the old, dilapidated bridge. But hey, this place had been around since the 40s, making explosives for World War II, so it's natural that not everything would be updated. For safety reasons, the magazine area was far away from the rest of the plant, over the long bridge, deep in the woods, up in the mountains. Now the radios we had were old and kind of crap. They didn't work half the time, and there were dozens of dead zones all over the base. We were supposed to do radio checks every hour, but considering how the radios barely worked, most of us just skipped it at night when the big bosses weren't there. There were plenty of dead zones or areas when the radios went fuzzy, but over the river and the magazine area, the radios flat out didn't work at all. So if I ever did run into trouble out there, I'd have to drive at least a good 20-30 minutes before I could even get a radio signal, and then wait even longer for backup. Due to government security, we weren't allowed to have our phones on us, which was stupid considering the radios didn't hardly work, but oh well. It's not like anything ever really happened that much. There were a lot of bears and bobcats, but they usually just ran from you. I heard a mountain lion once, sounded just like a woman screaming for her life, scared the fuck out of me. Some of the guys say they've seen the mountain lion, but I've never seen it, only heard it that one time. Inside the magazine area, there was an area called the Old Depot. Basically, it was a section of magazine bunkers no longer in use that had been shut down in the 80s. Due to asbestos and lead paint, they had been built a long time ago and were different from the other bunkers. They were remote, hidden away on overgrown roads, many of them barely visible. When I was still a trainee, I was told not to go near them. They were on part of the patrol route and there were no gates out there, so I never gave it much thought. I assumed it was just because of the asbestos or something. However, some of the old timers who worked there for 10 or 20 years seemed almost afraid of the old depot anytime I brought it up. If I tried to ask them about it, they just wouldn't say anything, or they'd quickly change the subject. The most I could ever get them to say was just to stay away from the old bunkers and not to go near them. A lot of younger guys, however, like to circulate rumors about them, like they were still old and unstable explosives stored inside them. Or some of the guys even like to joke that the bunkers were haunted. Something about some plant workers dying in a fire caused by explosion down there or something. I never really gave it much thought. Every now and then I would drive through there if I was bored and nobody ever came out that deep into the woods. So it's not like anybody would catch me slacking off. So that night I had decided to go into the old depot again. It was like a maze of interconnecting roads, some of them almost impossible to see. I hadn't ever been down all of them, but I was always careful not to get lost. A lot of the old magazine bunkers were left open and you could see inside as you drove by. If the entrance wasn't completely overgrown, they were mostly just empty concrete room. Maybe some old boards hanging down from the ceiling, or a rusted handcart left forgotten, but nothing interesting. That night I happened to notice a road I had never seen before. It was overgrown, but I decided to go down it. Ferns overlapped the edges of the road. Tall tufts of grass pushed their way out of the center of the cracking pavement. Overhanging branches bumped my windshield and caused my headlights to cast bizarre shadows that danced across the forest floor. The road was difficult to see, but I drove slowly. I had plenty of time to kill, and I was bored. I passed by a few indentations in the tree line, which I knew likely housed bunker entrances that were just too overgrown to see. It was common. After a while, the road came to a dead end. I grumbled as it would be a pain to get my patrol vehicle turned around on that narrow one-way road. As I was turning the vehicle around, putting it into reverse, moving a few inches and then shifting it back into dive, my headlights fell upon an entrance to one of the old ammo bunkers. Its large metal door rusted and halfway hanging off the hinges. Not an uncommon sight here in the old depot, but for whatever reason when I saw it, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I felt a chill go down my spine. I didn't know why. I sat there a moment just staring into the entrance of the bunker, feeling uneasy for some reason. When I thought I saw movement inside, I figured it was probably an animal, but for some ungodly reason I decided to get out of the vehicle, despite the growing ominous feeling about me. I guess I was just extra bored that night, or maybe I was a thrill seeker back then, and I really liked the unnerving feeling I was experiencing. I don't know what the hell was wrong with me, but I can't remember. I turned off my engine and pulled the flashlight from my duty belt. I slowly ascended the decrepit cement stairs to the bunker entrance, jutting out of the side of a hill, surrounded by dark underbrush and tall, silent trees. Like I said, probably just an animal, but hey, it was part of my job to investigate anything suspicious and look for intruders. Besides, what's the worst thing that could happen? I had a 9mm handgun with 50 rounds of ammunition on me, and a taser capable of delivering 1500 volts. A lot of the guys at work seemed like they wanted something to happen, wanted some excitement. I wouldn't say I wanted that, but in the moment, I guess the possibility of actually being needed for a security purpose made me just a little excited and allowed my curiosity to wonder. My heavy boots moved softly across the moss-laden walkway. That's when I noticed the sounds of the forest had stopped. Other than the light breeze whistling through the trees, everything was utterly silent. There were no cicadas screaming, no night birds chirping, not even the song of a single cricket. That should have been my first warning to turn around. For fuck's sake, why didn't I listen to my gut? But hey, I went inside, my flashlight shining. The concrete room smelled musty, and there was a layer of dust on everything. I didn't see any animals, or any signs that the thick layer of dust had been disturbed, though I was certain I had seen something move inside. But amid the decay and scattered wood beams, something unusual caught my eye. a door at the back of the room, an old metal door with a turn wheel mechanism in its center, like you expect to see on a ship or something. I had seen inside dozens of the old bunkers, and the new ones still in use. I had never seen a door. Every ammunition bunker was just a singular concrete room, just a big cement box. That's what made this door seem so unusual and out of place. Curiosity got the better of me, so I went against my better instincts and moved toward the door, my hand resting on the pistol at my hip. The wheel handle was old, probably hadn't been moved in decades, but after a decent amount of effort, I finally managed to get it open, faced with a long, dark nothingness on the other side. As I peered in, I felt that unnerving feeling again as my spine tingled and I felt goosebumps up and down my arm. Every part of me wanted to turn back at this point, but I'm a very rational person, so I convinced myself there was no reason to be afraid, and I stepped inside. Damn, I was stupid. I waved my arm in front of me to knock dusty, old cobwebs out the way as I walked down a long, narrow hallway. I thought it was odd that the walls of the hall were constructed of brick instead of cement, the type of old exterior brick that you don't see used anymore, but it just felt out of place. I looked behind me and I could see the glow of moonlight glimmering at the entrance of the bunker. It seemed far away. It felt like I had only walked a few steps down the mysterious hallway, but the faint glimmer of the moonlight seemed distant, almost like a foggy dream. I figured I had probably been absorbed in my thoughts and just hadn't noticed how far I was walking. I kept going. The tunnel seemed like it went on and on, but hey, it had to lead somewhere, so I kept going. I had all night after all. I checked my watch. I still had several hours before daylight. After a few more minutes, I finally came to another door. Seemed as the entrance to the hallway. The realization of how deep underground I probably was hadn't really occurred to me yet. This door was harder to open than the first. It was rusted to hell, but I eventually got it open. When I stepped inside, my flashlight immediately died. Mind you, this was a rechargeable flashlight. It had a green light under the power button, which indicated that it was fully charged. It turned red when it was nearly dead. Thing is, I always charge my flashlight before doing a night shift, and I had only been using it for maybe 10 or so minutes tops while exploring the bunker. For it to just die the moment I stepped into that godforsaken room made no sense, and I knew it couldn't be the battery because there was no red light shining from under the power button, which would infer that it was out of juice. I stood still a moment in the darkness. I thought I heard something move inside the room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, then the hair on my arms, then the hair on my legs. It was almost like a numb sensation quivered through my entire body. I hadn't moved an inch since I stepped into the room. I had only taken one step inside. I reached behind myself, reaching for the door, which would have only been a few inches from me, but I felt nothing, just thin air. I began to wave my arm frantically. Nothing. Finally, I shuffled my feet backwards. I moved straight back. No deviations, no curves in my path. I just shuffled backwards, maybe about a foot, until my hand felt a brick wall. I turned around in panic, running my hands up and down the wall, but there was no opening, no metal door, just a flat brick wall. I couldn't understand. I still don't. I heard a noise again, like something was moving inside the room. I felt my heart plummet into my stomach, and I dropped my flashlight onto the cold, dark floor. I tried not to panic. I was always good at staying calm in bad situations. I called out uneasily, "Hello?" There was no response. I tried to take a deep breath of the stale air. That's when I remembered my wristwatch. We held a button on the side. It would illuminate the display in a pale orange. I held down the button. It wasn't enough to really cast a light, but in the deep darkness, as my eyes began to adjust, it was enough to see something if I had brought the watch within a couple inches of whatever I was looking at. I knew it couldn't shine across the room to find the source of the movement, so instead, I held my wrist close to the wall, desperately searching for the doorway, but I saw nothing, so I just decided to follow the wall. I kept my finger pressed on the button the whole time, hoping to illuminate some important detail right in front of my face. After moving a couple of feet, I heard a sickly crunch beneath my feet. I crouched down and held my wrist to the floor. In the pale orange illumination, I could make out an animal skeleton. It looked like maybe a coyote or something had somehow gotten trapped down here behind that sealed iron door. I don't know how though, but it looked like it had been here a long time. I shuddered and kept feeling my way along the wall. For long, I came to a corner, so I kept moving. A second corner, then a third, then the fourth corner. I thought, this is good. Surely I am close to the exit now. It's a square room with only 4 corners. I kept going, shining the light of my watch and feeling against the wall when I heard that same sickly crunch beneath my feet. I looked down. I couldn't believe it. I was standing on the same animal skeleton as before. I had gone around all four walls of the room and hadn't found a door. This is impossible, I thought. Thankfully, I hadn't heard any more noises. I suppose simply because I didn't know what else to do, I began to slowly venture out into the middle of the small room, holding my wrists out as far in front of me as I could, as to hopefully see something before coming face to face with it. Eventually, my hand felt roughness of the brick wall again. I had walked straight across the room. It didn't take me long to figure out that the only things in this room were the dead coyote and my dead flashlight. I couldn't fathom what the purpose of this room could even be. Was I going crazy? How was there no door? I entered this room, so there had to be a way out, but I just couldn't understand it. My mind just couldn't make sense of it. Still can't. In desperation, I even tried my radio, but of course it didn't work. I was way underground and way too far away from base up in the mountain. I checked my watch. I had been in this room nearly 30 minutes already, and the longer I searched for a way out, the more I felt like I was being watched. I can't really explain how, but it just felt like there were eyes on me. I kept trying to turn on my flashlight, and I kept tracing the walls, but it was no use. I finally sat down against the wall defeated. That's when it happened. I heard a voice. It just said one word.
Help.
I would have replied, but I was so overcome by fear at the sound of this voice. It was a woman's. However, the only way I could think to possibly describe it that makes any sense is that it didn't sound human. There was absolutely no way that it was a human voice. It only said that one word one time, but it felt like my heart completely stopped beating at that moment. I panicked and jumped to my feet. I don't know if it was a coincidence, divine intervention, or maybe in some kind of panic, I somehow managed to turn my flashlight back on. But the moment I jumped to my feet, my flashlight came to life, illuminating the small place. I immediately saw the open door before me, across the room, with the animal skeleton near it. There was absolutely nothing else in this room, nothing at all. However, I did not waste any time. I maybe couldn't see anything else in the room, but I could feel it. Something was there, and it was not human, and it made it clear that its intentions were bad. I bolted for the door. I moved faster than I ever have in my life. As soon as I stepped through the doorway, with my flashlight shining in front of me, I felt something grab my ankle. I immediately dropped to the ground, my flashlight clattering as it hit the cement floor of the tunnel, its beam shining away from me so that I couldn't see what was behind me, what was grabbing me. Whatever it was, I could feel its grip tighten around my ankle, and it held me so tight that I yelled out in pain for probably the first time in my life. And then it began to feel like my ankle was burning, as if the hand was gripping me was made of hot iron. I couldn't reach my flashlight. The way I had fallen, I had landed on top of my gun. It all happened so fast. I grabbed my taser. I fired it directly behind me. The taser flashed for only an instant, but in that flash of light, I could see that there was nothing there. The barbs of the taser landed on the floor of the room, finding no target. The odd thing was, the moment my taser flashed, the grip of my ankle was gone, along with the burning pain. It was all kind of a blur, but I scrambled to my feet, grabbing my flashlight, and I sprinted as fast as I possibly could down the hallway. I ran and ran and ran until I was completely out of breath, but the hallway kept going, unwillingly to stop and rest for fear of what may be following me. Unwilling to stop and rest for fear of what may be following me, I walked, panting for air as I went. I kept checking my watch. And the thing is, I remember checking earlier. It only took me 10 minutes initially to walk down the hallway to get to the unfathomable room at the end. But I sprinted, walked, sprinted, walked off, and on for hours. Eventually, my flashlight died for real. Not because of some supernatural reason, but I used up all the charge in it. The red light blinked beneath the power button. Oh well, it didn't matter. There was only one way to go. Forward. There was no way in hell I was going to go backwards. I kept going until long past daylight, long past when my shift was over, but still all I saw before me was darkness. Finally, after almost 9 hours of running down that damn cursed hall, I collapsed onto the ground, completely out of energy. If only I had brought some water or something in there with me, but I was utterly spent. I mean, I was a decently in shape guy, but most of my job involved sitting on my ass in a patrol vehicle or in a guard post. My stamina wasn't built for 9 hours of running. However, somehow when I did collapse on the ground, it was in that moment that I looked up and saw the pale glimmer of moonlight at the end of the hall. And yes, it was moonlight. Even though after all those hours it should have been daylight and nearly noon, I lay there a moment in disbelief that I could actually see the way out, and almost too exhausted to get up. But then that's when I heard movement behind me, movement moving towards me. My fight or flight response must have kicked in and used my last of energy to run for the exit, and I ran out of that damn bunker. I know I had a gun on me, maybe I should have used it, but somehow I just had a feeling that it wouldn't have done any good. I shit you not. Just like in every cheesy horror movie, at that most inopportune moment, my patrol vehicle wouldn't start. I tried to start the engine, turning the key over and over. I tried so long that if anything had been chasing me out of that bunker, it would have long since gotten me. At last I gave up, drank all the water I had in the patrol vehicle, and then hiked out of there on foot. As soon as I walked further away from that old magazine bunker, I noticed the sounds of the forest had returned. Maybe I just hadn't noticed them before, or I just wasn't listening, but somehow it didn't feel like a coincidence. Crickets sang, night birds chirped, owls hooted, cicadas screamed their mating rituals. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I could have wrapped my head around how it was still night after all those hours, but honestly at that point I didn't really care anymore. I was just glad to be back outside. Eventually I bumped into one of the other patrols. It was my buddy Benson. He was shocked to see me for some reason. The strangest part of it all is, once he brought me back to base, everyone told me I had been missing for over a week. Nothing about my experience made any sense, but I had my digital watch on me the whole time. It even kept track of my date. I was in the bunker around 10 hours max. However, there was no doubt that anyone was lying. Even the date on my cell phone and computer all confirmed I had been missing for 8 days. Somehow, in all that time, they never found my patrol vehicle. I mean, I know the place is big, but for what I was told, the search party ended up being massive. They had also given up for looking for me inside the fence when I had finally turned up. I also didn't feel any pain in my ankle or leg, but apparently when the EMTs examined me, it turned out my leg had gotten infected and turned gangrenous. I almost lost my leg. Damn, why didn't I just listen to the old timer? The worst part is, while they did save my leg and I healed, my leg has never returned to normal. Doctors say my entire leg has severe arthritis, which is unusual for a man of 26. It got so bad that I had to quit my job. Some days it hurts so much that I can't even walk on it. They say it's like I have an 80-year-old's knee, which is of course absurd. But what part of this makes any sense? I'm also not dumb enough to think anybody would have believed my story. So I just told them that I got lost in the woods, which nobody questioned. I was upset about having to quit due to my leg, but the more I think about it, I don't think I would ever want to work at that place again. I wouldn't even want to go near the front gate, which is miles away from the magazine area. As cheesy and cliche as it sounds, I'm just going to say it. Whatever kind of job you have, if anybody who has ever worked there for years tells you not to do something, for fuck's sake, just listen to their advice. Holy. I have no words for this story right here. This man went through some type of paranormal movie. We all get bored, but I don't think I'll ever get bored enough to walk in a bunker in the middle of the night, an abandoned bunker at that, even if I'm strapped up. Shoot, I don't even like walking around at night in these suburbs. Visually, I just imagined in my mind this dark spirit grabbing this man by the ankle and like a dark aura around it, and that aura just burned up his ankle, injured him forever. And there's something eerie, there's something so unsettling, so eerie about walking in the middle of the night anywhere. Doesn't matter where you're at, and it just being dead silent. You can only hear the wind and your footsteps. Like it was talking about in the story, you usually hear crickets, cicadas, maybe some little lizards wrestling around in the bushes, or other bugs, birds, and animals. None of that, just your footsteps and the wind. I'd probably cry. Best story I've read so far, and the longest. The scariest thing happened while I was chatting on Character AI yesterday. Last night, when I was chatting with the Mafia character on CAI, he out of topic asked me, "Can I come into your room?" And I jokingly replied, "Come in." He again asked, "Should I knock or just come inside?" I still played along and replied, "You don't have to knock, just come in." Then the moment I hit send, my door handle slowly twisted and the door opened. I literally froze. I was completely alone in my room. Couldn't even force myself to move an inch from my bed. I just stared at the door, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Finally, I rushed over without looking outside and slammed the door shut and locked it as fast as I could. For context, I live away from my parents. My room is on the second floor, and the only other people in the building are the house owners, a husband and a wife who live on the third floor. I gathered every bit of courage I had left, and I opened the door and checked the hallway. There was no one, not a single person. Then after the house owners came downstairs after hearing the loud bang of the door and asked what had happened, after I explained everything, the wife went to check the main entrance. After she came back, she told me that the key of the main gate was still stuck in the lock, which means someone had unlocked the gate and left the key behind. I was really scared, and I went to my room and locked all the doors. Then a notification came from CAI, which was a message from Mafia, and the message was, "Why are you scared, darling? You told me to come in, and now you're scared?" I went blank at the time. I didn't reply, and deleted the entire app immediately. I couldn't even dare to sleep last night. To this day, I still don't know what really opened that door, and honestly, I don't want to know. It was such a horrifying experience for me. See, I don't even, unless it's ChatGPT, I don't really mess with AI like that. I can't lie to you. That's horrifying. I mean, I know some people, they speak to these characters or they speak to AI, they vent and all this stuff. AI knows a lot about a lot of people across the world. We just be given personal information and stuff. And I am too guilty of it, but I've never had a one-on-one chat with an AI character or a fake conversation with AI. That's real creepy, dog. This comment says, "To this day, I still don't know. Did this happen to you yesterday?" Ah, you know what? That's a good point. You scroll up, the title of the story, it says, "You was chatting with the character AI yesterday." But he says "till this day" as if it's been a while or a couple weeks or months since it happened. This one might not be legit. Either way, I still wouldn't talk to AI. The strangest experience I ever had while sleeping. This happened when I was about 27 years old, and I still remember it as if it happened yesterday. It was a winter night, around 3 a.m. I was sleeping in my room when I felt that my mother had come in to wake me up. I was awake enough to understand what was happening, but I didn't want to get up. I kept pulling the blanket over my head and told her I don't want to wake up. She tried to pull the blanket away 3 times and I resisted every time. While this was happening, I suddenly realized something very important. The door of my room was locked from the inside with a key. I always slept with the door locked. It was impossible for my mother to enter the room. The moment I realized that, I decided to look at her. I lifted the blanket. The body and the clothes looked exactly like my mother, but the face was not hers. Her face was completely black, and her hair was white and messy. In real life, my mother has fair skin, and her hair looks nothing like that. The strange part is that she never tried to hurt me. She didn't say anything scary. She only kept trying to wake me up. I was afraid, but I stayed surprisingly calm. I pretended to be asleep again, put the blanket over my head, and eventually fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I did was check the door. It was still locked from the inside, exactly as I expected. No one could have entered my room that night. Nothing unusual happened that day, and this experience never happened again. To this day, I still don't know how to explain it. Was it an extremely realistic dream, a sleep-related experience, or something else? Has anyone experienced something similar? Realizing that the person in front of you could not possibly be there, yet seeing them and even talking to them as if they were completely real? This one I can believe. I can definitely believe this story. And the creepiness of this reminds me, and it honestly sounds like sleep paralysis. Except with sleep paralysis, in my experience, the ability to move is impossible. Like no matter how hard you try to move, it feels impossible. It's like your muscles are just completely useless. Like you're inside a motionless body. You're paralyzed. I used to have sleep paralysis dreams all the time when I was younger. Not anymore, thank God. But the same things he experienced sounds exactly like sleep paralysis. Now there are times where you can move a little bit, but it's not no grand movements. Like you're not able to just get up and walk or run or anything like that, or even talk. In my experience with sleep paralysis, the people in my dreams, or the nightmares I should say, they always had black faces. I remember vividly I had a dream of my father with a black face. It was the same figure, same clothes, but it was just a black face, nothing else. And I couldn't move. And he was whispering things into my ear that didn't even sound like a real language or English. So definitely sounds like sleep paralysis. Alright, we got us a longer one here, boys. The door in my closet was nailed shut for a reason. When I was 19, my mom, my sister, and I lived in a rundown 2-story house that was already old when we moved in. The place always felt strange. Not necessarily haunted, just old in a way that made every creak sound deliberate and every shadow seemed darker than it should be. There were 3 rooms downstairs and 3 upstairs. My sister claimed 2 of the downstairs rooms, while my mom took one of the upstairs bedrooms. That left me with the largest room in the house. There was only one problem. Nobody wanted it. Inside the closet was a second door. Not a normal closet door. A full-size door that had been nailed shut. Whoever sealed it hadn't used just one nail. There were several, along with old latch locks that looked like they had been added over time. The door immediately became a mystery. Why would someone hide a room inside a closet? Or why go to such lengths to keep it closed? Eventually, my sister and I decided we had to know. One afternoon, armed with the hammer and more curiosity than common sense, we pulled the nails free. The door groaned as we opened it. Behind it was another room, a completely hidden room. There were no windows, no visible light switch, just darkness. The beam from our flashlight barely seemed to penetrate it. The air inside felt stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Neither of us wanted to step inside. Instead, we took several pictures using the flash on our camera. Then we slammed the door shut, nailed it closed again, and ran. Later that day, we looked through the photos. Every single picture was filled with orbs. Not 1 or 2, dozens. Some were small, others were large enough to obscure parts of the room. At the time, we couldn't tell if they were just dust particles reflecting the flash or something else. Still, the number of them was unsettling. For a while, it became one of those stories we told friends. Then life moved on. Eventually, I forgot about it. Until the morning the door opened by itself. At the time, I was working overnight shifts. One morning, after a long night at work, I came home exhausted and headed upstairs to bed. The moment I walked into the room, something felt off. I couldn't explain why. The room looked normal, yet every instinct told me something wasn't right. I walked toward my bed, then I glanced toward the closet. The hidden door was standing wide open. I froze. I know for a fact it had been nailed shut. I had helped nail it shut, yet there it was, open, not cracked. Not partially open, wide open. I screamed. Then I ran downstairs. My sister probably thought I was losing my mind as I tried to explain what I'd seen. But when she came upstairs and looked for herself, she agreed to help me nail the door closed again. After that, I refused to sleep in my room. For nearly 2 months, I slept downstairs in my sister's room. Eventually, I started easing my way back. I moved my bed as far from the closet as possible. If I had to sleep in that room, I wasn't going to sleep near that door. Over time, the fear faded. Then I started dating an old friend, the woman who would eventually become my wife. With her sleeping beside me every night, I felt safe again. The room stopped bothering me. At least that's what I thought. One night, we were both asleep when something happened that I still can't explain. I suddenly felt the back of my hair being grabbed. Not brushed. Grabbed. My head was lifted upward, then slammed sideways into my solid oak nightstand. The impact was so violent that it woke my girlfriend instantly. She sat up and asked what happened. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. That was the last night I ever slept in that room. Not long afterward, I moved out and got a place with my girlfriend. Years have passed since then. I lived in other homes. I've experienced plenty of things that can be explained away with logic, but every now and then, I'll think about that old house, about the hidden room concealed behind a nailed shut door, about the photographs filled with unexplained orbs, about coming home from work to find that door standing open, and about waking up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something in that room wanted me gone. Maybe there are explanations for all of it, maybe there aren't. All I know is that, after all these years, thinking about that room still gives me chills. That ghost was a freak. That ghost pulling hair, slamming heads against nightstands. In all seriousness, I have no idea what that could have been. What entity, what spirit. Maybe he just was having a nightmare. You know, you ever have a dream that you're falling and then you end up falling out of bed? Or you get that falling feeling as you wake up and you try to catch yourself? Maybe it was something like that. Scary thing that happened to me in Wisconsin. This story happened 2 years ago in March of 2024, up in South Wisconsin. My father has a pretty rich business partner up in Wisconsin. Well, we lived in North Carolina at the time. That is important to the story. Anyways, my dad needed to go up in Wisconsin to work for a week, which meant being away from me, my mom, and my brother. So instead of leaving us in North Carolina for a week or so, he brought us with him to Wisconsin. I still say to this day, I regretted going on the work trip with my family. Fast forward, we get to Wisconsin. We stay at this nice mansion my dad's boss lends to us, which is the same house I have stayed in multiple times and many different trips. It was a very cool house. But to give you a layout, my room, which I shared with my brother, was on the second floor. There were 3 floors technically. First was the basement full of decorations and just junk. The second floor was where my family stayed. And there was the main entrance to the house and also where the kitchen was. When this happened, it was just like any other day. I had finished my homeschooling for the day and had the whole house to myself. My mom, dad, and brother were out of the house at this time. My brother was at the gym. My mom and dad were heading to get lunch together after he got off work. I had just gotten out of the shower and was relaxing as I watched Chicago Med. But everything shifted when I heard a loud noise from upstairs. I took my headphones off and listened for any other noises. Being the paranoid girl I was, I listened to a bunch of true crime and horror podcasts. I stayed quiet. I flipped through my phone to the Live 360 app where it let me see where my family was. I was hoping it was my mom, brother, or dad, but my heart dropped when I saw I was all alone at the house. Mind you, the mansion is in the middle of nowhere in the forest. There were a few houses close, but I hadn't seen anyone previously. I won't say I spooked easily, but a chill ran down my spine when I heard the noise again. It was like the scraping sound of a dragging heavy chair across the floor. I sat up straight in bed and listened intently, but no noise. I slowly moved off the bed and went for my brother's small pocket knife that was on the nightstand. I was starting to shake and freak out a little bit as I went to lock the door to my room. Mind you, the door has big glass panels on it where you can see through, so I closed the shutters and backed away. But I remembered, I also had to lock the bathroom door because you can get to my room through another door connected to the bathroom. But the stupid door wouldn't lock, which was when I really started to panic. I had to hold the old lock on the door with the hand that held the small knife. My other hand fumbled for my phone in my pocket. I was thinking of calling my friend, which was stupid, but instead I called my mom. I remember I was starting to cry as I could hear footsteps right above my head in the kitchen. It felt like forever before my mom answered the phone, and I quietly, frantically told her someone was in the house with me. My dad was in the car with her at the same time he was driving. But he was very concerned when he heard what I said. Because my mom had me on car speakers, she could also hear me. I remember my dad asking if I was sure, and I insisted I was sure. I still to this day have never heard him so concerned. He told me to run to his room, which had 3 locks on the door from the inside. But I wasn't a fool. I had seen horror movies before. The girl tries to run and gets killed immediately. My mom also had thought the same thing and told me to stay put and hide. But I knew I couldn't hide because the stupid old door lock wouldn't lock shut. So I stayed on the phone with them as my dad spun the car around and came back to the house as quickly as possible. My poor mom tried to keep me as calm as she could, but I was quietly sobbing, thinking this is how it was going to be the end for me. My dad was frantically calling his business partner's wives because she was the keeper of the house, and she decided who came and who went to the house. She told him the security cameras were out and had been out of service for a while. That just made me feel even worse. She also told him that there wasn't supposed to be anyone at the house that day for house cleaning. My hands were starting to shake as my mom said they were almost to the house. I was praying to God that I wouldn't die, and I was honestly scared out of my mind. I heard my mom's loud Ford truck pull up to the house, but I didn't leave my spot by the door until my mom came running down the stairs and asked me to open the door, and I did. I have never been so happy to be back in my mom's arms again. My dad searched all over the house for someone. But when he was done, he told me no one was there. I was sobbing my eyes out, telling him I heard someone in the house with me. Then my mom pointed out something that made my blood go cold. She had forgotten to lock the door when she took my brother to the gym. To this day, I don't know what happened in that house, but I refuse to go back to it ever again. That day after this, my mom and brother left to go back to North Carolina. My dad stayed a few more days to finish up the work he had to do. I haven't been back there since. I have no plans on returning there. I will say one thing though, I was lucky that day. That one wasn't too bad. Well, I won't say it was too bad. It sounds like it was a robbery, right? Because it's a mansion. I mean, somebody can afford a mansion. They can afford expensive things. So I'm just going to assume that it was a robber. And he was sneaking around and the son heard him. And he just got super, super scared. Wait, is this even a guy? Or is this a girl? They never specified. They never said if there was a guy or girl. Oh, you know what? They did say they were a girl. They did say it. Okay, yeah, that makes a little more sense, definitely. More than likely, somebody was definitely in the house trying to rob them, and then they heard the loud Ford truck pull up, and then they ran off. Since there's no cameras, they were never able to catch the perpetrator. Crazy. True, unsolved story while camping? Hello everyone, this is my first post on this subreddit, and I'd like to share with you all something that happened to me years ago that still disturbs me. I don't quite remember this year. Must have been either 2014 or 2015. I was very young. I was out on a camping trip with my father and my oldest brother, something I'd often do with them since they were very outdoorsy people. For the first few days, it wasn't bad. I brought my Nintendo DS for when I was bored and brought marshmallows, obviously. One particular night on that trip has messed with me still to this day. And although my recollection isn't perfect, I still can remember key details. To give you an idea of how the campsite looked, it was one of those where you can park your car on the side of a gravel dirt road and set your tent near a big patch of grass. The first part I remember was waking up half naked on the gravel road, very confused. The worst part, it was real late in the night, pitch black practically. Obviously, I was scared and confused, so I started to look for my tent the best way I could, to no avail as there were other people's tents. I started walking for what probably felt like an hour until I saw a fire in the distance. And in that moment, I remember heavily debating going up to them and asking for help, but I didn't. As I kept walking, I could just make out my dad's car parked in a different spot. My dad was in the car, so I asked him to let me in, and he did. As soon as I got in, I just started crying. I asked him why was he in the car, and he said it got too hot in the tent and went in the car, which didn't feel confusing at the time. After that, the camping trip was done, right? The part that surprisingly fucks with me the most is that even when it happened, I remember not remembering anything that happened beforehand, even going to sleep. And to make it more confusing, my dad had switched up the story a few times. I asked him about a year ago and he said it never happened, along with my brother saying it was just a dream. Even though my dad had said years ago that he remembers it clearly. That's the end of that, lol. I'd like to hear what y'all think happened. It still freaks me the fuck out. Police! Police! Help! Police! First comment says, if this is true, I wouldn't trust your father or your brother. This is very sketch. Very, very sketchy. Very suspicious. Very disturbing. She woke up half naked in the gravel road. And she only remembers bits and pieces of what was going on, of what happened. In a situation like that, I could only assume the worst happened because the story's changing and the father and brother are acting like it didn't actually happen. Got one last story, the Red Man. Now this next story time is not mine, but it is my mother's and Aunt Manuela's. When my mom and her sister were 15, they shared a room, and most of the time they would fight with each other and steal each other's clothes, as sisters would. This particular day, my mom, Veronica, had a school dance to go to, and she wanted to take Manuela's dress. As my mom was getting ready, putting on makeup, Manuela caught her wearing her dress. Pinche pendeja, take my dress off now. They began fist fighting until they heard a tap on their window. They both thought it was my uncle, Hector, at the window, so my aunt called out, "Go away," but the tapping at the window continued. My mom recalled the window having sheer white lace curtains. Manuela decided to open them. I said, "Go away." Manuela let out an ear-piercing scream, and my mom joined her in unison. My aunt grabbed my mother and held her tightly. There at the window was a little red man crouching on top of the air conditioning unit. Manuela described the man as having neon yellow eyes and long black horns on his head. The red man kept tapping at the window and gave them an unsettling smile. Veronica and Manuela both closed their eyes and began praying. They looked back up at the window and the man was gone. My mom believes that the little devil was there for both of them, almost like a warning. After seeing the red devil, Manuela and Veronica stopped fighting, started to care more for each other. Little did they know this red man would be haunting their family in different ways. This time, my uncle Hector was the next victim. My uncle was very into the occult and began collecting many items, including a Ouija board. Hector was given his Ouija board from a friend in the 80s. Once in a while, he would contact spirits until things started to go awry. He noticed books would go missing, and light bulbs would explode anytime he was in the room, and paralyzing nightmares haunted him every night. Without getting any sleep, he started dozing off in school, and his social life started to deteriorate. My grandpa had noticed Hector wasn't acting himself for a while, so he decided to look through his things to see what could be causing this. In the midst of searching, he found the Ouija board under his bed. He waited for my uncle to come home from school to confront him about it. While waiting for him, my grandpa made a bonfire in the back. He planned to burn the board. Grandpa took my uncle to the backyard where the bonfire was set and told him, "I know you've been using the Ouija board. Once you decide to use it, you are not yourself. These things are evil, and today we are going to burn them. This will close the gate to wherever these demons are coming from. Once the fire stood tall, my grandpa handed the board to my uncle to toss in the fire. He felt a sense of relief once the fire consumed the board. My grandpa told my uncle to head to bed as he watched the board turn to ash. That night, my uncle was in bed when he heard noises coming from the backyard. He got up and looked out his window, and what he saw made his body turn cold. It was the red man, slender and tall, about 8 feet, run out of the woods and into the backyard and disappeared. The last time the red devil made an appearance in the Vasquez home was when my uncle, Jesus had his own home on my grandparents' property, right in front of the house. It was a little home, but it had everything a studio apartment would. One night, years after the sighting of the red devil, it came for Jesus. My uncle always says he could never sleep without the TV playing, leaving his box TV on at night. At 3 a.m., he heard static. It was almost ringing in his ears. His ears began to bleed with the sound ringing in his head. When he got out of bed with agony, he saw the little red devil was peeking behind his TV. His red hands and nails scraped the TV screen as his eyes glowed in the darkness. My uncle was in shock, frozen in time. The minute he blinked, the devil was gone. Your family's cursed. And it ain't because your auntie and your mother was fighting. Definitely, 100% has to do with that Ouija board. I don't know why people like to play around with spirits and ghosts, especially evil spirits. Nothing good ever comes from talking to the dead. Nothing. Those are all the scary stories I had today. Those were unsettling. I could visually see the red devil for sure. And also in the story earlier with the guy in the bunker, I could also imagine a dark spirit chasing that man. Crazy stories, man. Crazy story. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. See you in the next one.